through the elimination of opposition and criticism. New Testament authors even go so far as to depict those well off as just average citizens worthy of sympathy and respect. Could it be accidental that after Jesus was killed and the excitement died down, that the only person to offer him a decent burial was a rich man named Joseph? The implication of this story, found in Matthew 27, 57 to 60, is that only people of substance can be relied upon after others, like Judas, have emerged as betrayers. A similar theme is found in Mark 2:13 to 17, where Jesus is eating with tax collectors, who are arms of the dominant group. When asked why he associated with these individuals, Jesus replied, "People who are well do not need a doctor, but only those who are sick. I've not come to call the respectable people, but the outcasts," unquote. The impression conveyed by this story is that tax collectors are not expropriators, fully aware of their actions, but merely sick people who don't understand what they're doing and deserve more assistance than condemnation. Pity, not opposition, should be directed toward the tax collectors. He's to be viewed as a sick man, needing aid, not a competitor. And no doubt that aid is a less defensive, less alert citizenry. By describing the tax collector in a manner calculated to give him respectability and sympathy, the New Testament is aiding him and those he serves. In Mark 12:41, the narrative states Jesus was sitting near the temple treasury, and notice that many rich people dropped in a lot of money. Accounts of this nature create a favorable impression in the minds of believers toward those who are wealthy. The death of Jesus in Luke 23:13 to 25 is attributed not to the government as represented by Pontius Pilate, but to a crowd of citizens whom Pilate could not dissuade. Jews are later blamed for the act. After Jesus is nailed to the cross, the 35th verse says, "The people stood there watching while the Jewish leaders made fun of him." By accusing Jews of the execution, the New Testament has not only set Christians against Jews and aided the ruling clique in its consistent policy of divide and rule, but also lent dignity and credibility to the dominant group itself through having Pilate, of all people, defend the innocence of Jesus. The story of Zacchaeus, found in Luke 19:1 to 10, also creates a feeling of sympathy toward the elite. As Jesus was passing through the town of Jericho, a tax collector by the name of Zacchaeus came out to see him, but he couldn't see over the crowd because he was so little. Describing the tax collector as a little man quickly creates compassion in the mind of the reader. Unable to see, Zacchaeus ran ahead of the crowd, climbed a tree to see Jesus pass, which implies that even when difficult, the worst of people are seeking the Christian path. As Jesus passed by, he said, "Hurry down, Zacchaeus, because I will stay in your house today." The fact that Jesus chose to live with Zacchaeus, a tax collector, and not someone accepted to the majority of the people, is crucial. Later, Zacchaeus said to Jesus, "Listen, sir, I will give half my belongings to the poor, and if I've cheated anyone, I'll pay him back 4 times as much." And when Jesus responds by saying, "Salvation has come to this house today, for this man also is a descendant of Abraham," when that's stated, the final touch of sympathy, empathy, and respectability is given to the tax collector. Believers have been subconsciously taught that if Jesus can forgive the abuses of a dominant few, so can they. Members of the elite are really good guys at heart. That's the message. Followers are not only instructed to view compassionately and serve obediently, but also to uncritically support the prevailing political structure, which is an arm of those in control. Key verses in this regard are 1 Peter 2:13 to 14. For the sake of the Lord, submit yourselves to every human authority, to the emperor, who is the supreme authority, and to the governors. Titus 3:1. Remind your people to submit to rulers and authorities, to obey them. And above all, Romans 13:1 to 5. Everyone must obey the state authorities because no authority exists without God's permission. And the existing authorities have been put there by God. Imagine applying that to Hitler. Whoever opposes the existing authority opposes what God has ordered. And anyone who does so will bring judgment upon himself. For rulers are not to be feared by those who do good, but by those who do evil. Would you like to be unafraid of the man in authority? Then do what is good, and he will praise you, because he's God's servant, working for your own good. But if you do evil, then be afraid of him, because his power to punish is real. He's God's servant and carries out God's punishment on those who do evil. For this reason, you must obey the authorities, not just because of God's punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. Again, I can't help but think of Hitler. Since political leaders are being portrayed as God's agents, and those on top determine what is proper and orderly, the Bible is obviously being used to support the state, the government, the elite. Scripture further aids the elite and its governmental supporters by requiring believers to obediently pay taxes and fines, as the following verses demonstrate. Romans 13:6 to 7. That is also why you pay taxes, because the authorities are working for God when they fulfill their duties. Pay then what you owe them. Pay them your personal and property taxes, and show respect and honor for them all. Matthew 22:21. Pay to the emperor what belongs to the emperor, and pay to God what belongs to God. And Matthew 5:25 to 26. If someone, nearly always the most wealthy, brings a lawsuit against you and takes you to court, settle the dispute with him while there is time before you get to court. Once you're there, he will turn you over to the judge, who will hand you over to the police, and you will be put in jail. There you will stay, I tell you, until you pay the last penny of your fine." Unquote. Everything considered, if Christians actually behaved as the New Testament directs, it's highly improbable that the Roman government threw them to the lions. Either the story is myth or exceptional circumstances prevailed. Before people will willingly accept doing without and submit, they must be convinced that their physical needs are of no consequence or of far less importance than that which supposedly comes later. As long as they remain primarily concerned with obtaining adequate food, clothing, shelter, and other necessities, their thoughts will be essentially on this world and not what allegedly follows.